Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast with Dr. Thomas Hemingway. Have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I thought I'd be healthier, in better shape, feel better both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and be further along in my life? If so, come on this journey with my dad as he explores all things health and wellness from a holistic medical perspective, even as a classically trained physician. He'll share integrative strategies to optimize health and inspire you to join the modern medicine movement.
Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here, and a big aloha to you all out there in radio land, in podcast land. So grateful for you guys, so grateful for you, your support, for listening. Oh my gosh, I'm so pumped to share. I got a great podcast coming today. It's a topic that, oh my gosh, I was the biggest offender of not practicing good hygiene in this respect for most of my life. And I've come to realize the great importance of this one thing that we all do. And so we'll get into that in just a moment, but it's going to be a cool episode. I'm going to share two very recent studies. One of them just came out in the journal Circulation, which is a giant, super, amazing peer-reviewed journal of cardiology that's, mainstream journal in the medical literature. It just came out 2 weeks ago. I'll share with you a study there that I thought was pretty important, and another one last year that's also pretty solid research study on this very topic that I'm about to share with you. But anyway, before we get into it, just want to thank you for listening. Hope that you've joined my Modern Medicine Movement Health and Wellness Facebook group. It's free. I do lives there at least once a week on different topics, that mostly ones that you guys are interested in, that you guys have either messaged me or emailed me or asked questions. In fact, today's podcast is exactly that. It's on a topic that one of you wanted to know more about, and so it's kind of cool. I'm responding in on time. Actually, this was a comment I got just a couple of days ago, and I thought that's something that I've really appreciated learning about over the years and applying in my life. So, hey, why not do a full podcast on it and share the knowledge, share the wealth, share the, information that has helped me so much. So anyway, reach out to me, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast at Gmail, in my Facebook group, or at Aloha Surf Doc, or Modern Medicine Movement on Insta. Subscribe to the podcast, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast, and please write a review. So appreciate those reviews. It really helps get the word out. Super easy to do. Scroll down where you see those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Click on the one to the right, and then the link below it is a little square with a little pencil coming out the top. Click on that and just write a brief review. I love to hear from you guys. So without further ado, the topic you've all been waiting for, something that I was probably the worst offender for probably the better part of my adult life, and this has to do with sleep. I always used to say, that famous Cure song, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Anybody like The Cure out there? Oh, I love The Cure, man. They were one of my favorite bands in high school and college, and there's a song that they would sing that had the lyric, sleep when you're dead, and that was kind of my mantra for medical school, residency, college, 12 years of training in health and medicine, and I did not learn a very crucial point, that sleep is essential, and that if we get appropriate sleep, we can live longer, live happier, live healthier, avoid a lot of the common diseases. And I didn't know. Nobody really talked about it in my medical school or my medical training. So I had to learn it the hard way, and I've been able to apply this to my life the last several years, and it's actually made a big difference. And I wanted to share with you a recent article that I found pretty amazing, pretty interesting, and it actually just came out 2 weeks ago in the journal Circulation. And that, like I was mentioning, is a really important medical journal, and it's, peer-reviewed. It's super, well done study with over 400,000 participants. So that's a big N. N is the number of folks involved in a study, and it's a big number. Almost 500,000 people were involved in this study. It was published just 2 weeks ago, the 16th of November of 2020. And basically what they found in this study was that 42% that lower, okay, you can have a 42% lower risk of heart failure by getting the appropriate amount of sleep. So this is kind of interesting because the sleep in and of itself, everybody gets, it's kind of a spectrum, right? We have the short sleepers, the sort of medium, and then the long sleepers. And what's I found super interesting is sort of like the Goldilocks phenomenon, too little sleep, not that good, too much sleep, also not that good. So you got to get just the right amount, the sweet spot. And that sweet spot is usually somewhere between 6 and 9 hours. And most studies will say between 7 and 8 hours. This study actually broke it into 6 hours or less was considered too little sleep. And then 9 hours or more was considered too much sleep. And then sort of that Goldilocks area was between 6 and 9 hours. So I'll admit, probably for more than 20 years of my life, I slept less than 6 hours a night because I live by that mantra, you'll sleep when you're dead kind of thing. And well, the reality is you'll die sooner if you don't get appropriate and adequate sleep. And once again, this study from the journal Circulation was over 400,000 participants from the age range of 37 to 73. And they basically looked at these participants, and at the outset of the study, none of them had heart failure. And then they looked at the incidence of heart failure in this very group of 400,000 plus participants, and they looked at their sleep behaviors. And like I said, they pretty much broke them into three main groups: less than 6 hours, between 6 and 9 hours, and then greater than 9 hours. And what was interesting about this is that, like I said at the outset, you have a 42% lower risk of heart failure if you were in that window, like 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But what they also found, there were some other benefits for other sleep patterns. In fact, 8% lower risk in the folks that were early risers. So if any of you are like me in that respect and you get up early, they didn't say the hour, but I usually would say before 6 or 7 a.m. My personal favorite wake up time is about 5 a.m. And I think that's because I love surfing, and 5 a.m. is a good hour to get up and get out there when the wind is calm, the water is smooth, glassy, and hopefully it won't be as crowded because not everybody loves to get up at 5 a.m. So my whole life I've loved getting up early. I think it started in high school when I was trying to get up and go surfing before school. Like my school started at before 8, and I'd be up early. I'd surf even before classes, and it was I think it was then that I developed this super early riser habit. But 8% lower risk of heart failure was in that group, in addition to the other benefits that you got if you slept more than 6 hours a night. And especially in that 7 to 8 hour was kind of like their Goldilocks window. They had a 12% lower risk of heart failure for participants who got 7 to 8 hours, and a 17% lower risk of heart failure in those that did not have frequent insomnia. Now, insomnia they kind of described or defined, I should say, loosely as basically either a difficulty in getting to sleep, a difficulty in either staying asleep, or just the perception. You got to write it out on the survey and check the box. If you just perceive that your sleep is poor quality, they would count that as insomnia as well. So it's a pretty loose definition, either not getting to sleep easily enough, or hard to stay asleep, or you just feel like you got a crappy sleep. So they said that if you don't have those things and you sleep well, like me, you can ask my wife, I go out like a light bulb, and I'm basically like a rock until 5 a.m. Then I jump up and either go for a surf or get some exercise, or I write. It's one of my most creative times is early in the morning. I just feel juiced up with energy, even though I haven't eaten. I just drink a bunch of water when I wake up, and I might lift a little weights to kind of get the blood flowing, and then I just feel creative at that time, and I write. And also, the participants in this study that did not report daytime sleepiness had a 34% lower risk of heart failure. So basically, if you sleep the Goldilocks window 7 to 8 hours, you're going to have a decreased risk of heart disease, heart failure. If you sleep, if you're an early riser, you get an additional benefit. If you don't have insomnia, you get an additional benefit. And if you're not sleepy during the day, another additional benefit. So why would it be that sleep has anything to do with the heart? Well, I kind of like to look at it like this. I mean, just think about the heart as a pump, as a muscle that's literally beating every minute, every second of our entire lives. It never stops. But it does benefit from a time where we're resting, where we're not jumping up and down, we're not stressed out, we're not, cramping up our, vascular endothelium of our blood vessels and tightening up and having high blood pressure. Typically at night, our blood pressure will drop. Things will kind of mellow out. Our heart rate almost universally and everyone slows down. In the super fit individuals, heart rates can be as low as 30s while they're sleeping. I've seen this many, many times in my 20 years of medicine. It's funny, it'll be a young, healthy person comes in the middle of the night to the ER and has something, going on, and the nurse will come up and say, "Hey, this guy or gal's heart rate is 40 something. Oh my gosh, you want me to put him in a front room and, get the crash cart out and the pacer pads and the atropine?" And I'll say, "Well, what are they here for? What's their chief complaint?" And it oftentimes is nothing at all, related to the heart. They're here for something completely unrelated. And I'll ask them, I'll say, "Hey, you exercise, you're pretty fit, blah, blah, blah." And typically these people, resting or sleeping have a heart rate in the 30s and 40s. And that's perfectly well, for them. If you're not feeling like you're going to faint and pass out, and it's the evening and you're asleep or in the sleeping hours and your heart rate is slow and you have no symptoms, that's totally fine. You don't need to go out and get a pacemaker. Anyway, long story short is at night, it's helpful if you do get adequate rest. So your heart can actually, have some kind of downtime as well. So it's not beating strongly against a high gradient or a high blood pressure. It's helpful for the blood pressure to lower at night. It's helpful for the catecholamines or, the cortisol levels to go down at night. And all that happens when you get good, restful sleep. So just in that simple way, you can imagine, our heart as a muscle or as an energy pump, as a motor, if you will, that has to work our entire lives, every second, every minute, every hour of the day. It is beneficial to have some downtime, between hopefully 6 and 8 hours a night. I like to shoot for the sweet spot, 7 to 8 hours. I find that most studies will report that this is the desired, timing of an adequate rest is between 7 and 8 hours. And what I also found interesting about this study reported 2 weeks ago in the journal Circulation was that those that slept for more than 9 hours actually had a higher incidence of heart disease, heart failure. And so it was not beneficial to get too much sleep. So once again, it's sort of this Goldilocks phenomenon. You got to get just the right amount. So hopefully around 7 to 8 hours a night. And that will benefit you in so many ways, but primarily, as demonstrated in this study, it's with respect to less incidence of heart failure, less incidence of heart disease, heart attack, also less incidence of high blood pressure. We also know that getting quality sleep will help with having a healthy weight if we don't sleep enough. Because of what we've talked about recently in a podcast on leptin, we can become leptin resistant and have issues with being overweight or obesity if we're not getting adequate sleep. In fact, one of the things I mentioned is this simplest way to lose weight, this weight loss hack, if you will, is just get 8 hours of sleep every single night. And most people, if overweight, will lose a little weight just from the mere simple, thing of sleeping 8 hours a night. And there's too many reasons to count for why that's helpful, but basically helps metabolically. You're also not putting food in your mouths for at least those 8 hours, right? Hopefully you're having a longer window than that. My minimum that I recommend to people is a 12-hour window where you're not eating. I think it's just so helpful. You'll sleep even better if you don't eat anything within about 3 hours or so of bedtime. You also won't get gastric reflux or heartburn if you don't eat within 3 hours of sleeping. Plus, you give your body a rest, and your circadian clock will work better, and you'll just be so much more healthy if you have a window where you're not requiring your body to digest food. And I would recommend at least 12 hours a day. So that study basically at the end of the day reported that in these 400,000+ participants, they had a much lower incidence of heart failure. In fact, 42% lower risk if they got adequate sleep, between 7 and 8 hours. And like I said, they got additional benefits if they were early risers, additional benefits if they did not have insomnia. And so another reason to just get your 7 to 8 hours per night, because sleep when you're dead is just not going to cut it. That is not beneficial. It's not good to cheat yourself out of good, restful, quality sleep. The other study I wanted to share with you was last year, and I want to give you that information here. Let me just pull the study up, but it was let's see, get the date here for you. I'll put these in the show notes as well, because I just think it's cool. If you guys are interested at all, you can look these studies up yourself. I'll have a link to it. The other one was related directly to heart attack or myocardial infarction, and it's from the journal American College of Cardiology, September 2019. So this one's about a year old, but I like this one as well because it related sleep duration to heart attack, basically. And what I found interesting is this one, it looked at also a really large number of participants, and none of them having previously had heart attacks, but they basically looked at a large group of people, some of them who had risk factors, some of them who had even genetic predispositions to heart disease. And what they found was that if they got at least 6 hours a night, their risk for heart attack was 20% less if they got at least 6 hours a night. Now, what they found is that those that slept a long time or longer than 9 hours, they had an increased risk of heart attack, up to 34% greater risk if they slept more than 9 hours a night. And this could be because of a number of issues. Either they just slept too much, or they stayed in bed a long time because they were having insomnia and poor sleep. You can kind of imagine all the different reasons somebody might be in bed more than 9 hours a night. And it might just be because their sleep is crappy, and so they're trying to stay in bed longer to get better sleep. And so the way they looked at this is just in a simple timing. It didn't really rate the quality of your sleep. But what they did note was that if you slept too short, less than 6 hours a night, you would have a 20% higher risk of heart attack if you slept less than 6 hours. And if you slept more than 9 hours, a 34% increased risk of heart attack. And so their sweet spot, once again, was right around 7 to 8 hours. And for those folks that say, let's just put out there 6 hours, if they slept one additional hour and got up to 7 hours, then their chance of heart attack would drop by another 20%. So once again, the sweet spot for a good night's sleep is around 7 to 8 hours. This one from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, September 2019. I'll put that in the show notes. And when we look at sleep, besides the cardiovascular effects, that that I'm talking about here. There's so many other benefits from good, healthy sleep. And just before I get into all that, I want to just put out there that, and you can ask yourself, your family member, your significant other, if they ever have trouble sleeping. I mean, it's super, super, super common. I mean, getting a good night's sleep is not just a luxury. I mean, it's critical. Your life depends on it. You will live longer. You'll live healthier. You'll have a better weight. You'll have less diabetes, less heart disease, all these things if we get adequate sleep. Like, it's so, so important. Unfortunately, 1 in 3 of us, according to the CDC, 1 in 3 of us do not get the recommended 7 hours of sleep per night, according to the CDC. So that's super high percentage, 33.33% of us, 1 in 3 of us don't get good, adequate sleep. And, some of the most common things related to, poor sleep, once again, besides heart disease, it's the predecessor of that, right? High blood pressure. As I talked about at the outset, when we sleep, our blood pressure is supposed to go down. And if we have sleep problems, one of the most common things which we will develop is high blood pressure. If you've ever heard of anybody who has sleep apnea or people that snore a lot, they may be at risk for sleep apnea. And almost all of them universally have high blood pressure. And then having high blood pressure will increase their risk of heart disease, stroke, heart attack, all these things. So good sleep, super important. In my insulin resistance podcast with Dr. Bickman and the one that followed, we talked about how sleep is beneficial to decrease our insulin resistance and decrease the likelihood of diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, because poor sleep is directly associated with insulin resistance for a number of reasons. So we want to get adequate sleep to avoid that. Also, as I mentioned a little while ago, obesity is more common in those that don't sleep well, that aren't getting adequate sleep. And so super, super important. I did a whole podcast on the circadian rhythm and the benefits of sticking to a very, kind of natural diurnal cycle if we can. Some of us, like me, have to occasionally work at night, and so it's a little challenging sometimes to be on that exact day and night schedule, but there's a lot of things we can do to optimize our sleep. And some of the real simple things we can do is, as best we can, if we're not shift workers and having to be up at night, try to stick to a very sort of natural, what we call a diurnal sleep-wake cycle. In other words, we want to be up and awake and doing things when it's light outside, and then as it gets dark outside, we kind of slowly ease into the evening. And, if we have some blue light blockers, or if we have a setting on our phone or our computer where we can dim down and get the blue light to a minimum in the evening, that's helpful. But in the daytime, when we're supposed to be up and about, to get exposed to natural light is super important. The earlier in the day, the better, right? Getting out there, getting some sunlight, getting our photoreceptors of our eyes that we talked about in the Circadian Rhythm podcast exposed to light is super healthy. It's important. It wakes us up. It gets us energized. For me, probably my 2 favorite times a day are sunrise and sunset. I just love it. Like my wife knows this, and sometimes it's a little annoying because I get up early and she doesn't always love the mornings as much as I do. She's kind of a night owl. And so sometimes we disagree on what time is a good time to get up and stuff like that. And so sometimes she'll get up super early. Sometimes I'll get up super early. And, it's always a question, do we have the curtains drawn? Do we have them open? So it's interesting. But what's helpful is if we get on a routine. A routine is super helpful, both for our wake time routine as well as our nighttime and sleep routine. The more kind of regular our routine is, the better quality sleep we will have. So if we're able to, trying to go to bed, at the same time every night, give ourselves 7 to 8 hours. Supine, as I like to say, right, on our backs, lying in bed, supine time is important, 7 to 8 hours a night, and then try to get up roughly at the same time every single morning, including the weekends. Now, if you have, a 5 a.m. start time and you'd rather not get up at 5 a.m. on the weekends, that's cool, but just try to still get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So if you stay up late on a Friday night, watching a movie with your family or whatever, then, try to get up, 7 to 8 hours after that. So sleeping in may be a little helpful. And in fact, my wife and I just invested in some blackout window coverings in our bedroom, which we didn't have before. And I know it sounds silly, but on the weekends, we sometimes will sleep in till like 7, just whatever time our kids come into the room and wake us up. But on a normal day, we're usually up much earlier than that. So we bought these blackout shades so that on the weekends we can try to sleep in a little bit, because we often get to bed a little bit later on a Friday night because we're a little bit more lax. It's not a school night. We let the kids stay up, watch a movie. Don't be, super sticklers, Nazi about your times, but try to at least get, 7 to 8 hours in the cot, if you will. And then in the daytime, get exposed to natural light, good old fashioned vitamin D if you can. Go for a walk in the morning or at lunchtime. Try to get exposed to some natural light if you can. Also getting some physical activity during the daytime. Super, super helpful. That will help you sleep better. But caveat here to avoid is don't do a super hardy, active, all-out workout right before bedtime. That's going to kind of amp things up, get your adrenaline and cortisol up, and then you won't really be restful and in a sort of a sleep mood for several hours. So try not to do full-on exercise within a few hours of bedtime. You can go for a little walk. In fact, my wife and I recently adopted this sort of nighttime walk, if you will, after dinner walk, or whatever. It's been nice, just to get out, and that's kind of our walk and talk kind of connect time. After dinner, we go out for a walk, and it's an enjoyable time. And then we do what the Italians do that live till they're 120. They get out and they walk basically after every meal, and especially after dinner. It's kind of in their culture, and we witness that a lot. The couple times we've been to Italy, and we're trying to incorporate that in our own lives because we like to walk, we like to be active, and it gives us a little bit of a, bonding kind of quality talking time, right? We have our devices that we leave at home, and we just talk for half an hour or so while we take a walk after dinner. And then it helps with our digestion and all of that. So getting out for a walk, super, super important. And then once again, when it gets late in the day, just turn down the blue light, right? Especially within a couple hours of bedtime if you can. Sort of my mantra is 3 hours before, bedtime, don't eat. 2 hours before, don't exercise. 1 hour before, definitely no blue lights. If you can, 2 hours or so, even better. It's not good to be on your cell phone right up until the moment that you go to sleep, because the blue light will be messing with you. Also, I don't recommend waking up to a cell phone because it's nice to have a little buffer in your life where you have time away from the distraction, the stimulation, the busyness with the cell phones and things. Give yourself a little bit of time in the evening, a little bit of time in the morning to kind of set the pace for the day without all the things that are going off on your phone, the emails, the text messages, the Facebook Messenger, whatever it is that's blowing up your phone. Give yourself a little bit of downtime from that, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, and I guarantee you will appreciate that. It will help you kind of set the pace for the day and set your intentions for the day. And I find that it's been super helpful in my life. The other thing is, as I mentioned, don't eat within a couple hours of bedtime. Try to give yourself a little bit of a break, especially if you like to have an evening glass of wine. Try to separate that by a few hours before bedtime, because if you drink right before sleep, actually alcohol is a circadian rhythm disruptor and a sleep disruptor. It might make you sleepy initially, but you're not going to get a good, high quality, restful 8 hours of sleep if you have a drink right before bedtime. And then, of course, the real simple stuff that we sometimes fail to do is just that good sleep environment, that I mentioned, having a dark room, having the blue lights off. If you can, have a cool temperature, right around 68, 70 degrees. The optimal temperature is always kind of argued. If you ask a dude, it's going to be like 65. If you ask a lady, it might be closer to 70 or 75. So my wife and I compromise, and we do 70. We set the thermostat to 70, so it's not too hot, not too cold. And then, because we live in Hawaii, primarily, we like to have the ceiling fan spinning as well. We just like to have that kind of coolness factor and the air movement that helps us have a better sleep as well. So I recommend that. Blackout curtains, a good comfortable temperature, comfortable enough to where you could get under a little bit of covers, because getting all snuggly and whatnot helps you to sleep better, just being comfortable. And then without distraction, as quiet as it can be, is super important. Phones off, all that good stuff. So good sleep hygiene, super, super important. And, it's not always intuitive, in our 24/7 digital world. Many of us go to bed to our cell phones or to having the TV on, and it's messing with your sleep. It's really, really messing with it. And you want to maximize and optimize your sleep for all the reasons I mentioned at the outset, because sleep is crucial. I mean, literally, we will live longer and better and healthier if we get appropriate sleep, because all of the detrimental effects, starting with just the simple issue of inflammation. If we don't get adequate sleep, we are tending to be in an inflammatory state. I noticed this in my own life. Had some blood work done a few years back when I wasn't sleeping as well, and I thought I was diabetic. I mean, my fasting blood sugar was like 99 or something, which is not technically quote unquote diabetes, but it was way higher than it should have been for a, healthy weight, younger, individual. I think I was maybe about 40 at the time. And I thought, what in the heck? Why is my blood sugar, almost 100? I don't have diabetes. What's going on? I'm a healthy weight. I exercise. But what it was, I'm pretty dang sure, was the fact that I was not sleeping my 7 to 8 hours a night. At that point in my life, I was probably getting, on average 5, maybe on a real good night, 6 hours. And I noticed that in my own N equals 1, and I've seen it in many, many, many other people, but poor sleep is a pro-inflammatory state. And that inflammation gives us risk to have type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, stroke, hypertension or high blood pressure, obesity. Also, right now, I think it's so important in all of our minds to have an immune system that's working well, right? That's functioning well. And if we don't get adequate sleep, our immune system does not work well, right? We've all had it happen to us where we've been up all night on a project or getting all kinds of stuff ready for a big trip or whatever, and then we don't sleep at all, or we sleep very little, or we think, I'm gonna sleep on the plane, and oh my gosh, it's like impossible to sleep on a plane. It was hard, years ago, and now wearing a mask and all this other stuff. I mean, it's just not comfortable, right? It's just it ain't happening. And if we don't sleep well, our immune system doesn't work well. Our natural killer cells, which help us fight infection, don't work well. And so the cool part about this is that literally it can be fixed overnight with a good night's sleep. Our immune system will start to work appropriately if we just get a full good night, 8 hours of sleep. So if you haven't been getting that sleep and you're getting sick all the time, this could be part of the deal, or if you are a couple pounds overweight and you want to lose that weight and you can't do it, try this little pearl. Just sleep a full 8 hours. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at all the benefits that you can have from just sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. Plus, the obvious stuff, right? You're not going to be cranky like I used to be for years and years and years, decades, I think. Just ask my wife, for all those decades of college and medical school and residency, that was 12 years of our marriage that I was doing all this stuff of training, 12 years of time where I didn't get adequate sleep. And then I was working 100 hours a week, and she'll tell you, man, I was cranky. I didn't believe it, but it was true. It affects our emotions too, like, duh, right? Sleep deprivation is not a good thing. It also decreases our reactiveness, right? I mean, I'm kind of ashamed to even admit, but I've definitely driven sleep deprived in the past and had many close calls. Knock on wood, I've never had any accident from sleep deprivation, but I've definitely found myself waking up and being kind of driving by braille, so to speak, hitting the reflectors because I'm kind of dozing off, and it's not a good thing. Our reaction time is diminished. Our ability to do higher level functions, several step tasks is diminished. I mean, we don't want to be sleep deprived. So please, 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 please do whatever you can to get a regular sleep schedule. I mean, write it into your calendar if you have to, in your planner or whatever. Schedule 7 hours a night minimum. That's what I shoot for. That's my goal. And I promise you, not only will you be healthier, in a better mood, maybe even lose a little weight. You'll have a decreased incidence of all these chronic diseases, from diabetes to heart disease, stroke, cancer, heart failure, like I mentioned in a couple studies in the outset. But you'll be happier, right? Because poor sleep is also a risk factor to depression, right? It's just so many things play into our sleep. We need that restorative time to allow our body to rest, our hearts to rest, to not be working overtime against a high blood pressure gradient. We need the blood pressure to drop, our hearts to kind of chill, have a little bit of downtime. We need our brains to have that downtime as well. In a previous podcast, I talked all about the so-called glymphatic system, which is sort of the time where our brains sort of rejuvenate, refresh themselves, flush out all the toxins of the day, through the so-called glymphatic system described initially in an amazing research study by Jeff Illiff. I believe he was from the University of Washington. You can look him up. That was a pretty cool study, and he found that good sleep is so important in decreasing your risk of neurodegenerative illness like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's, because at night, while we're sleeping, the brain is sort of cleansing itself. It's flushing out all the toxins. The glymphatic system, this sort of brain circulatory and sort of cleaning up the waste products from the day, cleaning up those amyloid deposits, that put you at risk for Alzheimer's, and the plaques and the tangles and so on, sort of sweeping all this stuff up and flushing it, if you will, and sort of refreshing our brains, and the sort of brain circulation, the amyloid and tau get kind of flushed out, so that hopefully we don't get these neurodegenerative conditions like dementia, Alzheimer's in particular, Parkinson's, lots of other neurodegenerative conditions. But part of it could be related to sleep. Sleep is so important, and if anybody has those conditions, they will actually do better with good restful sleep, because they will have less progression of the illness. This has been shown both in clinical studies as well as on MRI scans, PET scans as well. Super cool stuff, and all related to a good sleep. So what else can we do? Supplements and all that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, I try not to do supplements for sleep in particular if I can avoid it, because I don't want to be sort of dependent on anything. But when I do travel, I do take melatonin for a couple of nights, because every time I bounce between Hawaii and the mainland, there's going to be like 3 hours time change, sometimes 4 hours time change, sometimes more than that. So I do take a little melatonin for a couple of nights just to kind of reset my clock. But what I would recommend to you is take the smallest dose possible if you can, because it's best if that melatonin comes from your body itself, because you can kind of get used to it, if you will, and it can have a negative feedback loop if you take too much of it. So your own body's ability to regulate your sleep through its production of melatonin will work less well if you're taking melatonin every single night. So just take the smallest dose possible, 2 milligrams if you can, get away with it. Some people take up to 5 or 10 milligrams, but try to take the smallest dose for the shortest time possible, and then just try to practice all these other sleep habits that we've talked about, right? Environmentally, have that cool, dark room. There are some other things you can consider, like lavender. It's pretty benign, doesn't really have much for side effects. It's calming. I sometimes will take lavender at night. A couple of my kids benefit from this as well. L-Theanine is an amino acid that helps with relaxation. That's something that you can consider taking at bedtime as well, like 100 to 200 milligrams. Magnesium is my favorite of all times. I did a whole podcast on magnesium because it is so beneficial, and it may in fact be the most common mineral deficiency in the world, because we just don't think about it, and we're just not paying attention, and we're not checking for it. But there's so many important functions, over 600 reactions in the body that magnesium is important for, either as a cofactor for the enzymes or other processes where it's just essential. And you'll find that if you take magnesium, it'll also help you relax. For me, it helps with my sleep. It helps with prevention of migraine. So I do take magnesium every single night, sometimes in the morning as well. Magnesium threonate is a real good one to help you with sleep, kind of calms the brain. And if you want more on magnesium, just listen to my magnesium podcast because I don't have time to get into all of that. Valerian root is another that's been shown to help with sleep. There's been several studies which have mentioned this. The usual recommended dose is around 500 milligrams. Ginkgo is another natural herb that has many benefits, including helping with sleep and relaxation and stress reduction. Not as much evidence, particularly for sleep, but also plenty of evidence helpful with mood. 250 milligrams, about 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime, can be helpful. So all these things, discuss with your healthcare provider, take the smallest dose possible if you need to. But firstly, just do the environmental and behavioral things that I mentioned. So important to, get a cold, dark room. 3 hours don't eat before bed, 2 hours don't exercise, 1 hour at least minimum. I try to shoot for 2, but no blue lights. That's kind of the basic stuff. And then just get into a routine with it, really. I mean, whatever it is that helps de-stress you. I know a lot of ladies out there like to take a warm bath in the evenings. That's been shown to be relaxing. Others may do some meditation, whatever works for you to kind of de-stress and just kind of get into that routine will help so much. So whatever that is to de-stress, be it meditation, prayer, gratitude journal, writing, whatever, gets you kind of just mellowed out, that nice warm bath. For me, I like to jump in the hot tub if I'm at a place that has one. That helps kind of get me in the mood. My son goes, "Dad, every time we get in the hot tub, it makes me lazy." Well, we usually don't get in the hot tub except for in the evenings after dinner, and I think that's a good time to be lazy because you're getting ready for bed. But anyway, don't want to belabor any of that. But at the end of the day, the goal is to stay asleep for around 7 to 8 hours. That's where most of that benefit happens. That's sort of that sweet spot, that Goldilocks phenomenon, and that's what I would encourage you guys to shoot for. And if you sleep less than that, don't get down on yourself, try to, do a couple of these things. If you're not doing all that I've mentioned, you try to take a couple for the next few weeks and work on optimizing your routine, whatever it is that may be helpful for you there. And, just one thing at a time. This is not going to happen overnight. I know for me, it took me weeks, months, probably even years before I could get myself to sleep 7 or 8 hours. I thought it was not in my DNA. I thought it was, I was just one of those 4 or 5 hour a night guys, and that was my, that was me, right? That was my DNA is what I thought. And I found that hasn't really been the case as I've practiced these good sleep hygiene habits. And I feel better than ever. My mood is better. You can ask my wife if I'm cranky and grumpy all the time like I used to be when I didn't get good sleep. And I think she'll most likely say that she's noticed a benefit. I know I have. So anyway, here's to a good night's sleep for you all. I'm wishing, hoping, praying that you guys can get your 7 to 8 hours a night so you can live healthy, live well, live longer, and just drop the dogma that says sleep when you're dead that I used to abide by. That's garbage, even though I love the song by The Cure. We got to get beyond that. It's been shown in way too many studies that sleep is so beneficial. So I wish you a good night's sleep. So anyway, have a great week. Great holiday season coming up. Hopefully you're with your family or you get to at least communicate with them if you're in a place where it's hard to get family to visit, like with us being in Hawaii. It's so hard to get people to travel there because of all the stuff that's going on. But I wish you guys a great holiday season and great restful sleep. So this is from me to you, a big aloha, and have a great sleep each and every night, 7 to 8 hours. I'm praying for you, hoping and wishing you guys can do that because it's going to be so beneficial. It's going to be so helpful. I know I was a naysayer for many years, but I found it is so incredibly helpful, and you will notice a difference. Not only your mind, your body, your soul, your energy, your happiness, but your health. Less chronic disease, less illness, better weight, all these things, better energy, and it is worth it. It is worth that supine time. So that's all I have for you. A big aloha.